Hi everybody, welcome to What a Time to Be Alive. I'm your host, Sarah Williams, and joined today by Brendan McDonald, very talented prop maker and set builder in TV and film, also my roommate, also my boyfriend.
My boyfriend.
Boyfriend. I just wanted to list your biggest accomplishments.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Well, thank you for having me on this wonderful podcast in the wonderful Apartment G Media Room.
This is our little entertainment media room.
The entertainment room, and we have, the Moose the Bun Bun, who's just hopping around and enjoying himself as well as a little family affair right here.
I feel like I talk about him a lot on the podcast, and guests talk about him, but no one can see him because he's just on the floor.
He's on the floor, and he's just loves to be around the action, and don't we all, though? You know?
He's a sweet little man.
Yes.
I was thinking I should have a podcast where I interview Moose, but of course he can't respond, so I would just interpret his body language movements.
Right.
Like,
maybe.
what would you say right now he would be doing?
It's like, I don't know.
Like, Moose, how you feeling today?
Right.
He's
like,
inquisitive. He's excited.
now he's happy.
He's going for the feats.
Oh, good.
What a sweet man.
Yes.
Anywho, so I want to talk to you today about your work as a prop maker and a set builder. Because I feel like you say that to a lot of people, and they're like, "That's so cool," but they're like, "What does that mean?"
Right. The first thing that people think is they're like, "Oh wow, set design," and it's like, actually, no. It's really set building. Is the full carpentry, full building, full fabrication side. In terms of designing, we really only design the sort of the more engineering of sets.
Gotcha, like how to make it so it meets the plans or the design that someone else did.
So there are the plans that we get from the there's production designer, there's art director, there are set designers, there's blueprint specialists who print out there's a lot of modifications that they make on these blueprints. But one thing that they don't include all the time is the walls that they want to have wilded. A wild wall is obviously a wall that they pull out in case a camera wants to go there.
Gotcha.
That's the biggest deal. So if you need something to be reinforced, then clearly you need to build and design something. Now we've even the show that I was on a year ago, American Horror Story, we built it was a full cabin, an infirmary. And inside there were double-sided walls. So in fact, a real, working hallway and a room, and the walls in between needed to be wilded. So essentially you're putting in tiny little shims on either front and back, and then you're skinning it and leaving room for it to be possibly
moved out.
Does
it roll out, or do you lift it and it's got little brackets or arms that help it balance? And
so each show is different. Sometimes they make it really nice for you. They'll label the screws that need to come out. They'll circle them maybe. They don't really do coffin lock, which is you could use, but
what's that?
A coffin lock is sort of it's like a hinge. It's sort of a locking hinge.
Okay.
So it's something you twist a lock and it keys into a male to a female, and then you can basically do that a million times.
I'm picturing a guitar case or something like that
similar.
It's
Not really. No, it's sort of it's like a pin and a receiver of a pin. It's sort of like a door.
Mm.
Just almost like that. Turn the knob and then there's a pin there. So but the engineering of all that is really up to the foreman and and basically usually the foreman on the show. And it's a very interesting, very thoughtful process to make sure that all your tracks are covered, because if they want to pull out a wall and you've you not only built it, possibly expanded or contracted within the heat in Southern California.
Right, if it's wood or whatever,
and then
also humidity.
Yeah, and then also finished with a scenic, so it's also painted. Some cases, in American Horror Story, it was all raw wood that they used, but it is a very thoughtful thing just to say, I'm going to build this, but this needs to be pulled out. This needs to be wheeled out and or whatever.
And it also needs to be basically camera ready, and that when they're filming the opposite way, if they're filming on the false wall, it still has to look like it's part of of the room, right? I mean, there's no like cheating around that.
There is really not much cheating. What's interesting is when you start to look at seams and see things as a set builder, you notice things. But
Right.
what's nice about, especially using seams to your advantage, you can actually have a seam that can be part of a breakaway. So, that wall, the wild wall, will have to come out, but it also will have to go back in.
Right.
And it also might have to do that over the course of many months, over a season. So it's, anyway, it's very
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Well, and then sometimes too, it's not just like a wall. Sometimes it's a window or something like that. So when you were on Kidding, the Jim Carrey show,
Right.
weren't there like windows within the outside, like the exterior of the house that you had to be able to swivel so the camera could fit in and like get that shot, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So that was a fun project. So with all the homes they did, we did like basically I guess it's interesting. We think about maybe like 4 homes, but one was a 2-story, and then we had about 3 or 4 it was a 2nd story, just standing alone 2nd story, and a standing alone couple 1st stories. But the windows, they put me on that project with Hugh Conlon, a incredibly wonderful man, experienced foreman, construction coordinator, probably retired with close to 150,000 hours of work, which over the course
That's
of
amazing.
over the course of being, probably got in when he was about 18 to 65. That is extraordinary amounts of labor hours.
Yeah.
But he was in charge of this project and brought me on to do this. And so yes, each double-sided window, which we made them so they weren't. These windows we were not able to like pull up or down in terms of like you're not opening the window to let the air in.
Right. It's not a functional.
It's not
window
a
in that
functional
sense.
double pane window, but the windows did have a gimbal, so top and bottom, a pin on either, and you could basically take each window and just kind of twist it. So twist it to the side, camera goes in, and what was an interesting feature was the 2-story houses that we built was sort of a window and window setup where
Right.
the camera would be looking in. You'd be in this house looking in that house, and vice versa.
Because it was like Jim Carrey bought the house next to his ex-wife, and he'd like
Yes.
peer in and be watching them. So they needed those shots of like the spy shot.
Exactly. Yeah, that was. So we did that, and then funny enough, with Hugh, he retired on that show.
That was his last
That
go.
was his very last
Aw.
one. And I remember
Did you
saying
have a
to him,
party?
well, I was off at that point. He stayed on, and I was part of the first build. And then as it gets closer to filming, they let us go and let a lot of the help go to just kind of dial it into a couple
The sets
guys.
have been built.
The
kind
sets are
of.
built.
So
It's-
yeah,
and
there's just little maintenance.
And as you know, I'll tell people for my show, being hired and fired is. It's not a big deal. Sometimes I'll say to people to see their reaction, I'll be like, "Oh yeah, I was just fired from the show," and they're like, "Oh," and they just like give this reaction of like, "Oh my God, you were fired."
But it's because it sounds like it's not fired in the way like other people are fired. Like, when
No.
I was a waitress and people fucked up all the time, they get fired, but you didn't do a bad job. It's just the job was over.
The job's over, and it's not a game of favorites. You can be a really talented carpenter; they just don't know you. It's really more of if they're comfortable with you working around them, if they know you, and so in therefore a lot of shows, I was like, oh, I really killed it. Even on Kidding, and then all of a sudden I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, it's my last day. I'm like, wow, but I'm like, hey, that's just part of it,
Yeah.
And we move on, and within a week I'm on another job. So
Yeah, it's not hard for you to find work.
at this point, if you're watching television out there, Amazon, Netflix,
Hulu.
regular TV,
Yeah.
Hulu. I mean, TV is hot, and
There's
it's
a
and it's
lot.
a lot of it is in Southern California and Los Angeles. So
Yeah.
since I joined the union in 2013, it's just gotten better and better.
Yeah, so that's a good segue into like how the union works, and because it's kind of gig work and you're kind of a contract like employee, but yet there's also a lot of benefits that go through the union. Explain some of that because it's very different and unique to other industries and
Right.
other jobs.
Right. So yes, hired and fired. There is no resumes. It's just, are you available?
Right.
I'll say that the etiquette, in my sense, there's sometimes an old-fashioned etiquette of, are you available? Yes or no. It's not a like details thing. You don't know where you're going. You don't know what it is. And
It could be a commercial shoot that you're going to be on for 2 days, or it could be a new show
Yeah.
that you're going to be on for 6 months or 9 months.
you could be on for a day. Usually, if it's a day, they'll let you know. But there are some cases where they don't. I think the etiquette, in my opinion, the biggest etiquette is letting you know if it's not a regular standard rate
Right.
of pay, to let
That
you know that
seems
it's
huge.
not. Because if you show up and it's not, then there could be some hard feelings.
Be a little bit of anger. Brenny's not talking to anyone all day.
Yeah, right. I'll just stop talking. Yeah, exactly. the code of silence, as I call it, is or the silence is golden option, which is always if you're just not in a good mood or nothing's going right or you don't like the people, just don't talk, and they'll leave you alone, and usually you can just do your work and get stuff done.
And I like that silence is golden is also another like industry term. So you're keeping it all in the biz.
That's right. I'm keeping it all in the biz.
Biz. Finger guns.
Yeah. So the
the union,
the
yeah.
union works. It's basically you have to be a union member to be on a show.
And how do you get in the union? Because sometimes
That's the tricky part. It's like, hey, you need to be a union to get on this show. Well, I don't. How do I get in the union? Well,
Be on a union show.
Be on a union show. Wait a minute. So there's one way. There's actually two ways to get in. One way is if you were on a show and it flips over to a union show, then you could get on it, but you still need 30 days. I was on a movie
within 1 year.
Yes, within a year. I was on a movie that flips. I got 14 days. Everyone else got all the days they needed, and no one joined, except for I think one painter.
Why did they not join?
Well, a lot of them weren't. They were just skeptical of what the union could get them.
Gotcha.
I knew from the very beginning it was way more pay, full, free benefits.
Yeah, hello,
benefits.
free.
We're talking about a pension and health care that you don't pay a dime into. You pay union dues, and pretty much
But isn't it
for per hour you work is put in,
Into a bank.
Money is put into a bank, which is then put into, right, so then you earn those things, which
Those
is healthcare.
benefits.
Yeah.
and they're covered or paid for by the producers union?
Yeah, the producers union, I mean, they must be just loaded beyond belief. Of course they own all the content.
Right.
But
All the
what's-
money filters through them.
the money filters through them. So in a sense, you're like, well, the producers, of course, they're the most powerful. You think of the Directors Guild and all that, and you're like, well, those are powerful people too. Interestingly enough, even actors, directors, producers, they can be all one and the same. You can be in multiple guilds.
Right.
A lot of people are doing that and crushing it, just like, big old Brad Pitt there, just,
Right.
he's doing a lot
Producing
of...
a ton of stuff.
Really, yeah, executive producing a lot of great stuff. But anyway, even our safety classes are paid for by the Producers Guild. So we get paid now $20 an hour to take safety classes, which since they've been doing safety classes, it's still it's good to give people just general knowledge about their surroundings, because
Yeah.
there are obviously very, very hazardous things to be around.
Well, and I feel like you can get in a zone when you're on set where it almost feels like it's not reality to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're just kind of like, oh, we got to shoot this time, or we're on this tight turnaround, and so you can just kind of rush through it and whatever, and forget about safety very easily.
Safety safety is paramount here at Universal. Yes.
Look at the camera and smile when you say that, Brenny.
Yes. So yeah, it's a fun job, but I'd say that being in the union, you just leaps and bounds ahead of the rest.
Yeah.
Now, some of these guys that are just getting in are 18 years old. The other way to get in, I said, was through show flipping, but you have to get 30
Right.
days. The other way is if everyone on the roster, or almost everybody, is working. If they can't contact those last people on the list and they're somehow, out of it or whatever, they open up to permit status. And permits, which they've had now for the last 4 summers, not including this summer,
Right. COVID.
because of the quarantine, has been open to permits. In fact, if you were so, savvy, you could actually, and you knew how to do the work, you wouldn't have to join the union. You could get on shows as a permit and work until the permits are up. Or I think you can actually work until you're off the show.
So basically a non-union person can work on a union show, get union rates, but not have to join.
Yeah.
And then can just...
You could just leave and do another thing. You could actually gig it that way, which wouldn't be, no one would really care.
Right.
It would only be in your benefit to do that, because then at that point, you could make a career out of it.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, at a certain point, it's a decent way to make money. Union is good, and especially when you are I have been promoted to a gang boss.
Love that name.
The gang boss is
very
good,
sexy.
but it's funny because with a contract, you're guaranteed 8 hours of work, no matter what. A gang boss is guaranteed 10, and a foreman is guaranteed 12. Now think if you went on a nice little sitcom, little 3-camera show, and the sets are really easy, and you're doing your work, and all of a sudden you're like, all right, well, it's 8 hours, we're pretty much done, wrap it up, and you get to leave with the rest of the crew, but you get paid for another time and a half of 4 hours. So really,
it's unbelievable.
That is sort of I think that would be the goal for me, is to just become a foreman.
Yeah.
And I think that with just time, it works that way, where the people that are around your age
Yeah.
want to hire you, they trust you.
You kind of moved up the ladder a little bit, PG. I mean, it's just like any other job, right? You just get that experience and meet the people.
And I get a real good shout out to my the current, I'm on the show Orville right now, the Seth MacFarlane show on Fox.
I'll share some of the unbelievable, once it's released, I guess.
Yes, we'll wait till the releasing of the show, and then we can share some of that. I know.
They're beautiful. They're stunning. There's
the
spaceships, and it's just gorgeous.
What's interesting about this show, and now being promoted, is that it is the single most challenging show I've been on so far. Not only, it's a show where everyone's very serious about it. They're like, oh my gosh, treat it seriously. There's, very important people around.
And the sets are hero sets too. I mean, they're very intricate and technical. Sorry.
No, you're okay. They're very technical. The one, especially the design feature of these sets, is that there's a ton of light boxes. So of course, if you know Star Trek and whatever, there's tons of screens, and there's a lot of lights, and of course touch screens and stuff. So essentially, we are making these very sleek, and you make a bezel, which is a frame for a TV, or you just make these little light boxes, the frame for a light, and essentially too is engineering it too so that people can get in, the light people can get in there and futz around, because you're sort of let's say I was building the table, one of the wonderful tables I built on this show, and I had built the whole thing, and they're like, well, lighting needs to kind of put their gear in. Now they need these ballasts to put in for LED lights, and there's a ton. It's absolutely... It's
all covered in LEDs.
The entire top is... So it's LED lights shown through plexiglass that has a graphic on it to make it look like a control board.
A futuristic, touchscreen control board thing.
Yeah, and it
looks...
the
size of this surfboard or bigger. Size of this cabinet.
Yes, it's very... Yeah, a lot of them are very big, and... So at one point, my first one, they were like, all right, well, they need me to pull the bottom off this piece I had glued, and man, do I love glue. Especially with MDF that we're working with. Glue is the most important thing we use. Fasteners are good, but glue is what holds it together permanently.
Is it just stronger with the wood, or?
It is. It's much stronger. Its fasteners just hold it in place while your glue works.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I had to pull this panel off, and I spent maybe 2 hours just pulling this panel off, just babying it, because it had been finished with paint. It was very clean, and I ended up pulling the panel off, and then making a little funky feature with magnets, so that this little door with a hollow point behind it they could put all the wires, put the ballasts, and then they could put this door back on and it would just stick with magnets.
You have to nail it in or screw it in, or
and they could pull it off whenever they needed, and that was I just love using magnets. They're
but you would never, being in that field, I would never guess you'd use magnets and
building.
It's fascinating.
Interestingly enough, if I had the means, I would hang pictures with magnets. I would, do everything.
Magnetize the walls.
You just magnetize everything because it's like you can just stick stuff stick stuff up there and remove it whenever you need it without any,
Right, any nails or holes or
exactly.
anything like that. So you obviously do props, like we were just talking about with the tables and things like that.
Right.
Something that's, I think, interesting about your field, too, is that you are just the builder. You're not the painter. You're not adding the lights. You're not necessarily moving things or moving the sets. You are the builder. And there's separate unions for the painters, separate unions for the stagehands. And
Absolutely.
So interesting.
Yeah, in some, and it's, there are loose boundaries on every show. Some shows you go to, they're like, okay, like, don't touch this, we want to do this. Or some shows where it's like, we don't have, the laborers or the grips, they're like, we don't have enough manpower or time to do this. You need to figure out how to like get your piece down to there, or ask like one person to help you. But essentially it's like, I'm not going to be, I'll say this, Fox is very loose, which is a nice place to be.
Nice.
If you're going to Universal Studios or Paramount, you must get a craft services person to bring a cart over to bring something from the mill over to a stage. And that's,
Craft services?
So craft services is interesting.
That's
so
food.
Most people know craft services as just the snacks on the show.
Yeah.
The snack providers.
The best part.
Yeah, absolutely. But interestingly enough, craft services has been around and has a union. They're part of a grip union that they are the services for the crafts. So not just snacks. They do, in some cases, half of the laborers we work with are actually through craft services. Some of them are through a labor union and some craft services, and they will do transport, sweeping, whatever. But on Universal Studios, they are very much a part of like the studio where they need to move things from A to B.
That's really funny to me. I never knew that.
Yeah.
Is it like craft, like arts and crafts services?
No,
and then craft, like craft cheese services.
Yeah, right. Everyone's thinking like craft services, like craft cheese. It's the services for the crafts out there. So we are the crafts, the prop makers. And,
I like it.
So the other departments would be like I just said, the laborers.
Right.
Obviously saving us a lot of time by cleaning up our mess and helping us move things. And then the painters that make our work look beautiful. Right. In some cases, with some of the product that we have, they are just essential. It's like, ooh, that didn't turn out the way we needed it.
Yeah, let me do some contouring
just a little bit of caulking and some paint, and guess what? It's
looking real nice.
Yeah, it's looking good. What I enjoy about the field is that you could get away with a lot of murder on some shows, just totally mailing it in, and I've seen some guys do that.
I'm sure.
There are some really, really great carpenters out there, and there's some really, really bad ones.
I mean, in any field, and especially with the union where, you kind of have those employment protections, you can abuse that.
Yes.
If you wanted to.
Yes. So in some cases, I really enjoy obviously the pieces that they are very proud about, the hero pieces that they want to look pristine. And that's usually... of late, it's been the project that I've been given.
Well, I'm kidding. You did some of the hero props that were holding the puppets for Jim Carrey and things like that.
That was really tricky. So there was basically, it was easy to build. It was like a plywood base with wheels and then two sloping sides at a very steep angle, maybe like 30 degrees or 60, if you will, from the ground. And they wanted these dowels sticking out all at the very same angle. So, you can't just like drill a hole and just like stick a dowel in and then like try to make it glue and dry the same way as the other ones. It's like you're going to have it where it's going to be off. So essentially I had to create this jig that was a Forstner bit. So basically take the width of take the diameter of the dowel and use a drill bit that's the same diameter, and then create a 30-degree angle guide into the wood. And so, if you're taking a drill bit and you're not going straight into it, it's going to just skip off, it's going to drag, it's going to get away from you very easily, especially a Forstner bit. So I had to really work this thing, this jig I made, so that it was just every time it was the exact same motion, same depth, and it ended up looking really
It was
good.
gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
How did you get into set building? Because you studied film in college, and you didn't ever necessarily want to be like an actor or front of the camera.
No, yeah, I never really found that. I mean, I dabbled in the production side, in the assistant director side, obviously the production assistant side, and
PA.
the PA.
The $25 a day gigs.
Well, it's interesting, and it's like, the business side like that, just the running of things is just not creative. It's
a business.
It is
at the end
very.
Of the day.
It can be creative, but it's really not the creative part. It is really just the getting things done. And when I did that, it wasn't for me. I just not. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't want to like hustle people along. I don't want to rush. It's for me. I think it was probably the best thing to never be in sort of a customer service industry because I think the ability to be frustrated with other people around you, is something that I don't think I ever wanted to do or
to have to deal with and
yeah, exactly. So essentially, when it came down to it, there wasn't much work for me as a PA. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and this friend of mine from college basically was like, "Hey, my father-in-law is the general manager at a place called Jet Sets. Jet Sets is in North Hollywood. It was a non-union scene shop. Now is a union scene shop. But when I started, this gentleman, Doug Morris, hired me for not much money at all. I wish I had gotten a little more guidance into my start as a set builder. I could have gotten a lot more money, but not that I necessarily deserved or earned it, but just in a general sense. I was making
in a business sense.
It was in a business sense. It was just I was just making nothing, and I got exploited. But at the very same time, in a year and a half, I learned so much that I was able to move away from there. I got out of Jet Sets, and even so, when I was at Jet Sets, they didn't hire me full time. Sometimes they'd be like, "All right, there's no work.
Right.
Take it home. Whenever you're gonna stay at home," and then all of a sudden they call me back in. They never gave me any unemployment papers or anything. I never knew about that. So really, I was struggling. I was on very little money, and then finally I branched off and I started working with. This is actually this guy Adam Jetty from my high school, and it's funny.
From Massachusetts. It's
yeah,
not like an
Massachusetts.
LA guy.
He had moved out. He was a set dresser. And all of a sudden he's like, "Hey, we need someone to help us out." So I dabbled in that. I got a little taste for it. And he's like, and then all of a sudden there was a job opportunity for them. They're like, "Hey, we're have a lot of work. Come and, be a part of our group." And it was for all cash. And I wish I'd saved some pay some taxes, but I was making
all these like hard life lessons.
Oh yeah, but I was making quite a bit more than I was on the
non-union
on the non-union side, and got a ton of experience as set dressing, also painting, doing kind of nuanced stuff. We did very small like photo shoots. We did a couple music videos. But really what it was all about was just kind of like getting a set and getting it there and being a part of every part of it. Rigging and whatever else. And
it helps you become so well-rounded though, because then you know each craft surrounding yours, and then you can just be savvy.
So that right there is, I think, what holds me separate from a lot of the people I work with. A lot of these kids and a lot of these people I know and prop makers, they got in about 18 or 20 or whatever they did, and all they know is carpentry and all they know is prop making. And for some of them, there's just like, there's certain ways to do it and there's rules, and that's the way they were taught. But for me, knowing this whole other side, you're able to anticipate the different things you might need. Or it's like, I'm not going to put framing here because something needs to go in there. And so, just, and more so than that, it's like, I've worked with, fake grass or even real grass in a studio, and it's a mess. And it's like, it's just a lot of, it's just nice to know the big picture.
Yes.
And that is, not just looking at the blueprints, but knowing the different departments.
Have that macro view of the whole project.
Yeah. It's absolutely saved me from a ton of things. And also being able to say, ask some questions, and then I can
Right.
engineer a set so that I'm not, blocking anybody's, thing that they have to put in or whatever it may be.
Going with a plan.
Yeah.
So last question.
Yes.
Now we're kind of in this COVID world and we don't really know what's going to happen, and we've been kind of waiting to hear about Orville and when you're going to go back, and
Sure.
the industry kind of used to have these standards that people work 12-hour days, and that's pretty common. That's very normal for you.
Very.
6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's not uncommon for you to do 6 12-hour days in a week.
That's right.
Which is a lot. You rock it. Do you think there's going to be any changes to that kind of culture when we go back, or do you think it's just going to be full steam ahead?
That's a good question. At first it's not going to be like that. At first there's going to be a slow pace to it, but
Limited people and
limited people, limited who knows what,
Right.
projects they have to managing a project now could be a nightmare. But I think that in all honesty, especially if there's a vaccine, especially if things can possibly go back to even remotely normal, there will be a lot of safety guidelines that will still be in place. But I just don't see it lasting for a while because of just the way money works and the way that I think that we got to this point of working these crazy hours. And it's not uncommon. I think with my job, people used to talk about that. We're like, oh, we worked 16-hour days for 2 months and didn't have a day off, and it's that can happen, but I think that it'll end up being like that again.
Think it'll just go back. It is, it's the hustles who can make the best content the quickest and put it out. And,
and especially now with now this transitioning of content from TV to basically just cable with more
right.
Streaming. Streaming, but it's cable with more steps. It's
Right.
click out of something, click into something else. But I think that it's always a money thing, and it's just people want to save money, and I don't know if that means the sets are gonna get, gonna be, less grandiose.
Right.
But there's tons of money still to be made, and but I just see that the hustle will eventually go back and be just crazy.
Just how it is.
Yeah, I think it'll just eventually be like that, or we might work more days, possibly.
Oh, less hours, more days.
Less hours, more days. That would be bad, but again, it's nice that we get overtime. So
right, yeah, you're still being compensated, and
the compensation is great for those.
Yeah.
In terms of actually the safety thing, I will say that we've read about already, not just the masks, but driving. We will know. So if you show up to a show, usually you do not drive to a location and drive back. If you drive to a job, you drive to it and then you do the whole day there. Then when you're cut, you drive back. You're not on the clock.
Right.
But if you're driving on the clock, which is now could be a thing, they're now going to compensate for possible mileage, and it's going to be a whole thing with that, which I've done before. It's not a big deal, but we're just not used to. In that sense, just usually a truck just brings everybody to where they need to go, drives you back, no big deal. But the nice part about that too is that if you're driving somewhere, you are on the clock.
Yeah, right.
Making that sweet
and
cash.
in LA with the traffic,
Oh yeah.
Keep that up.
If all of a sudden you're like, oh, we have to come back from Long Beach, and it's like, oh, but it's afternoon traffic, and you're like, oh, well, we're on the clock.
Well, it's not just 45 minutes; it'll be an hour and 45 minutes. Give me that sweet, sweet money.
Yeah, just give me my money. I think that's
Shut up and give me my money.
But I'm very thankful for the union to give me my wages and to really make it very fair and to make sure that people aren't exploiting you, because as we've seen in other businesses, and especially even when I was non-union, it's like there's not much holding back from them just saying, we don't have to do this or that.
Well, I think especially in an industry that's so highly competitive like the entertainment industry, people are just so excited to be part of it, they'll just work for free. I mean, I work for free as an actress often enough.
Absolutely.
So
especially in an industry that's great. They're very used to that too. I was just shocked. I thought it was brilliant that the whoever it was who sued over being an intern at a production company, and they were just totally like showrunners, and all of a sudden when they sued in the state of California, it was like, or even Los Angeles, they were like, this is not okay.
Yeah.
They're like, interns can get coffee and can be by your side.
They're not running the show.
They cannot do a lot of things, even paperwork is very I don't know. I think
an intern's there to observe.
they're there to observe, and I'm glad that happened, because there are so many people that were exploited for so long, and it's just it's this, like you see, it's a sort of like time and time again, just popping up of like, oh, they're being exploited, and it's like, that's just not the world we want to live in. You have to make rules to set guidelines. It's not being a bad person or like stealing money. It's you're really getting your fair wage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And having an advocate.
Totally.
I like it. Well, it's summertime here in LA this week, meaning it's like 85 degrees and we don't have AC and we're under these lights. So I think we're going to wrap it up.
Oh, very good. Well, I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, thanks for being on. And, since we live together and quarantine makes it difficult to get guests, I think Brendan should just be like a guest every season.
Well, we could talk about other stuff too.
Yeah, we got lots of things we could talk about.
Yeah.
Moose, for one.
We can talk about moose, and also, of course, our favorite thing is movies and TV.
Duh. Maybe we do like a trivia or something.
Ooh, that would be good.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, little facts or something like that. We'll brainstorm it. But thank you so much for being on my show and helping me put all this together and having this in our home. I love it. So, thank you. And what a time to be alive.
If I